Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Tell Your Story. I'm your host, Todd Nesloni, and each week I look to bring you a different guest who has encouraged, inspired, or challenged me in one way or another and bring them on to share some of their story in hopes that it inspires you to tell some of yours. I'm thrilled this week for my guest, Alex, on with me. Alex, kind of introduce yourself, tell everybody who you are.
So my name's Alex Valencic. I live in Freeport, Illinois, which is a kind of small community up in northwestern Illinois. I work with the Freeport School District. My job is an incredibly long title. I am the curriculum coordinator for 21st Century Teaching and Learning, which I like my elevator pitch of it is that my job is to help teachers feel comfortable stepping away from the PowerPoint and putting away the worksheets. So I work to support teachers in pushing progressive, innovative practices in the classroom. And every time I hear someone at a conference, they hear my job title and they're like, dude, Alex, we're in the 21st century. We don't need to use that name in your job title. I'm like, well, we still have teachers in the world who teach us if it's in the 19th century. So yes, we need to remind them we're in the 21st. Before working with the Freeport School District, I spent 7 years in Urbana, Illinois as a fourth grade teacher. Also spent 3 years as a substitute. Education is in my blood. It's something I've been doing really since I was 13. I always like to share the story of my Sunday school class. One year, our teacher never showed up. So I just grabbed a reference book for our Sunday school class, and I taught my class of about 6 other Sunday school kids for 6 months before someone realized, hey, there's no adult in the room. The funniest part of it is that the Sunday school president, his son was in the class.
Oh,
and
my
apparently
goodness.
He like never really picked up. Every week. He'd be like, so Jared, how was church today? And Jared would be like, well, Alex taught us this lesson about such and such. And he's like, didn't really catch it on until he walked in one day and he's like, you guys, where's your teacher? They all pointed at me and said, Alex is our teacher. And he's like, no, he's a student in the class. And it's like, well, I've been teaching for 6 months. So, and I like to look and say, I never looked back from teaching after that point.
I love that. And so, you talk about that from way back in your childhood. And so was there ever any kind of other career aspirations, or were you always drawn to just teaching?
To me, I say that I was always drawn to teaching, but if you ask my mother when I was in kindergarten, I was very adamant that I was going to be an architect. I have no recollection of this, but I'm not going to tell my mom she's wrong because she remembers having to buy like the big red brick, like cardboard building blocks just for me. But some point between kindergarten and fourth grade, I shifted my idea because definitely in fourth grade, I had a phenomenal teacher. The things she did in the classroom, I look back now and I can like, oh, she was doing project-based learning. But I never heard the term while I was in school. But she allowed us as students to do a lot of like peer teaching and working collaboratively. And I quickly noticed anytime students were working groups, classmates would come to me and be like, Alex, we want you to look at our work. Give us feedback on our work. Tell us how to make this better. Yeah. From that time onward, I was determined to be a fourth grade teacher. I once dreamed that I would teach fourth grade until the day I died. Like literally, I thought I would be in the middle of a lesson, like 90, 100 years old, and just drop over in the middle of a class. And that would be my life. I took a slightly different turn with the plan when I was in my early 20s. Was doing missionary work for my church, and I met a guy in California who he was an administrator, and we were just talking about education. And in the middle of the conversation, he looked at me and said, I know you think you're going to be a fourth grade teacher for the rest of your life. You're not. You're going to become a principal one day. Just accept it and start planning. I was like, well, that's an interesting idea. I started paying attention. I was like, yeah, that is something I want to do. So I shifted my goals a little bit. I still wanted to teach fourth grade, which is why I was so delighted to get to do that for 7 years. But the goal now is to move into building level leadership. Right now, I'm kind of in this in-between where I work at the district level. I'm not an administrator, but I definitely get to do leadership, and looking forward to that day when I'll have my own building.
Yeah, and speaking of which, being at the district level, I'd love to know, as we record this video, we are in the midst of a pandemic and everybody's worlds have been upended, especially in the education world. And so how has everything going on affected your position and what you're doing?
Well, I think the biggest shift is that for the first 2 years of this job that I've had, I spent almost every moment in classrooms working with teachers and working with their students, just
Mhm.
pushing in and being present and visible. Like it was very common for me to just walk into a classroom, the teacher would just point to a group of students, I would just go over and sit down with them and start learning alongside them, and also a lot of coaching and supporting of those teachers. And now, because of the pandemic and the restrictions, I don't get to visit classrooms because
Yeah.
we don't want to have someone coming from outside the classroom coming in and then possibly going into another classroom, that possibility of a cross contamination. So instead, for me, a lot of my work is now done from my office, which, while it's nice, I'm on the second floor of a middle school. I've got a corner. I can look out and see the high school across the way. But I miss working with students and miss working with the teachers. I can join in on Zoom meetings and spend lots of time emailing, but I don't get to be like that, the boots on the ground in the classroom the way that I used to.
Well, Alex, you seem to be someone who's pretty secure in who you are and what you bring to the table and where you want to head. And so, my question then is something I love to ask in all of these episodes is no matter who we are, I feel like we all, on some level, deal with doubt or comparison or trying to be as good as other people. And so, my question for you is, how do you personally keep doubt at bay so it doesn't take root in your life?
Well, it's to be perfectly honest, because I don't think there's a way to not be. If you ask my wife, the answer is that I don't. She will tell me that my big head is not just the big hair, which for those who are listening and aren't watching, I've got like this amazing thick curly hair on the top of my head. But no, it's my wife. She's very quick to bring me down to earth when I talk about how I know that I'm good at the work that I do
Yeah.
because people tell me I'm good at the work that I do. But there are times when I do that doubt of, do they really think that? Or are they just telling me that because, whatever reasons? There's definitely days when I go into my office and I'll be looking around and be like, I have absolutely no idea what it is I'm supposed to be doing with myself today. And it sometimes becomes that feeling of, why is the district even paying me to be here? I'm not
Mhm.
doing anything. But what helps me is when those are usually the days when I get an email from someone in the district who says, hey, I checked out the resources in this link you sent me, and it's really helping me revitalize my science because I wasn't sure how I was going to teach science in a pandemic, but these resources really helped me out. Or just the other day, I reached out to our local historical society and said, I've got a first grade class of students who are doing a here and now comparison of the world to the way things were when our community was first founded. We can't come to the historical society. Could you give us some resources that we could share? And the historical society was like, yeah, let's put a bin together of artifacts and we'll send it to you to take to that building. And the teachers were just like, this is amazing. You're bringing the historical museum to our students. So I guess for me, it's when I get that doubt, it's those moments of affirmation that I don't ask for. I'm not one who goes out fishing for compliments, but they seem to come in those moments I need them the most.
And I think that's true for a lot of us that those kind of things happen at just the right time. And so, when you look back at your own experience as a student in school, what was school like for you? Did you enjoy it? What kind of student were you?
Uh, Elementary school, I don't really remember a whole lot of it until fourth grade. Like I feel like fourth grade was that pivotal year that I really began to bloom as a student. That, like I said, my teacher Kathy McNamara, bless her forever, because she literally changed my life. Being that teacher who allowed me to tap into my own interest in a way that no other teachers had. That began my love and passion for education. Middle school, I had some really great teachers in middle school who were very supportive of and encouraging. High school, I will always give credit to three teachers. There was Mr. Jerry Madsen. He was my freshman English teacher who he had a sense of humor and a way about him that you could tell that he
Uh,
loved teaching English. and he loved teaching freshmen. And that was a match that worked perfectly for him. My band director, Mr. Jim Tallman, the passion he gave for everything astounds me to this day. He is the band director who every single rehearsal, by the end of rehearsal, he was just covered in sweat. He just fully into it. Every rehearsal was a performance. There was never this idea of practicing for a performance. And then the third teacher in high school is Dwight Hirschberger. I never actually had him as a teacher. He was the director for the plays and the musicals, and I did a lot of the tech work and things in the background, set construction. And he allowed me to grow and learn in doing those things, to the point that my favorite memory was I operated the follow spots, the spotlights for all of our plays and musicals. And my junior year, the student director, who was a senior, was giving directions to me on what to do. And I knew that her directions didn't make any sense and they were going to distract from this, like the scene we were doing. And we started arguing back and forth on the radio about it. And finally, Mr. Hirschberger, who we all called HB, he comes on the radio and he says, you know what? Alex has been using these spotlights for 3 years. He knows what he's doing. Trust him to do his work. Which for me is like, I feel like that's a mantra for education. Like we need to trust people to do their work. And that's what helped me love what I was doing in school when I had to navigate through some of those not so great experiences. I was the target of bullying from students who were aware of the fact that I have hearing loss. I wear hearing aids. And because of that, my speech is not what people would call that, quote, normal speech. But those teachers helped me just develop my own self-confidence, where the students who attempted to engage in bullying quickly found out that I didn't respond to them. I didn't feed into it. And they weren't able to turn me into a victim because I refused to be a victim myself. And I can say that knowing that there is a ridiculous amount of privilege that comes from being able to say that, because not everyone can avoid having that happen. But I was very fortunate to have that support group that allowed me to get past and move beyond those who were trying to tear me down.
You know, I'd love to dive into that just a little bit and say, you know, you mentioned having this hearing loss and having it for a while. Talk to me a little bit about how that has affected how the man you've become today.
I guess there's kind of like two different sides to it. One is I know that I'm able to have a level of empathy for other people because I know the challenges that I've gone through. There's been students who I've been able to support very directly in a way other teachers couldn't. I had a student one year who he had severe hearing loss and wore hearing aids, and he hated them. He always tried to take them out. He would turn them off. But when he saw his teacher had them, it began a transition for him where he realized that the hearing aids didn't have to define him as an individual. Most people didn't even know he had them. That he was self-conscious of it because he didn't know anyone else who did. But seeing me, he was able to see that, and it gave him a little bit of that courage to be like, yes, I have hearing loss. Yes, I wear hearing aids. Those don't define me, who I am as a person. The other side of it is there are definitely challenges for me because of that hearing loss. That hearing aids don't make it that I have perfect hearing. They just amplify sound for me, which means there are times when someone tries to communicate with me and I don't understand what they said. And I'll ask them to repeat it. And sometimes they will get frustrated and will either say something like, never mind, or will change the subject. And I'm like, wait, hold up. I need you to repeat what you said because I did not hear the words. I'm hard of hearing. Please tell me what you said, because obviously what's important, or you wouldn't have said it in the first place.
Well, you know, and something I'd love to ask about that is I have a friend who is hard of hearing as well. And they have said, you know, during this times that we're going through right now with everybody wearing the masks, she said it's made it even more difficult because she's so used to being able to read lips whenever she couldn't always hear them as well. And now that's been taken away from her at the school that she works at. And so are you seeing some of that kind of too of with all the mask wearing? Because I think that's something we don't think about when we have these things. We're just like, okay, wear a mask. It's so easy. Put it on. And it's like, but for some of our people that have hearing concerns, it's a thing where it's like, it makes it a little more difficult for me.
Yeah, it definitely does. We had a team meeting one day where everyone wore their masks, and at the time, my hearing aids, something had happened with them. I needed to take them in to get recalibrated. But with people wearing masks, I could not hear a word anybody was saying, like at all. Like, I would hear the sounds, but I couldn't understand what they were saying. And my boss, she's new this year and didn't know me. And this is like one of our very first meetings. And I could tell she was getting a little frustrated that I wasn't responding quickly to questions she was asking. But I told her immediately afterwards, I said, hey, I'm sorry. I'm hard of hearing. And with everyone wearing masks, I can't see their mouths moving. It's hard to tell what people are saying to me. I don't read lips the way some people do, but I definitely use them for cues for what somebody is saying, that it just helps to understand that a little bit better. So after that, she actually arranged where for some of our next team meetings, I was actually able to join them remotely, because then I could turn up the volume on my computer to have it a lot louder to help me. And someone would type things into the chat box, which just helped me follow along with the conversation. Yeah. I then went in to see my audiologist and found out that both of my hearing aids had malfunctioned and needed to be replaced. I'm like, oh, that would be why they're not working for me correctly. Yeah. I got them fixed. And then it was like this whole like, whoa, like there's sounds I'm hearing that I haven't heard in a long time. I didn't even realize those were sounds that people heard. But yeah, the masks have definitely presented some challenges that I wouldn't have expected originally.
Mm-hmm. Well, Alex, as we wrap this conversation up, one question that I always love to close on is, I believe.
Sorry, that's my dog is.
No, usually mine's the one going crazy whenever
he somehow got himself locked in the room with me. I will be right back.
Okay. Yeah, usually it's my dog, the one that's losing it and barking all over the place. But my dog has actually been quiet this episode. I'm shocked, but. Well, Alex,
I was trying to figure out how he got in here, because but there's two doors in the room, and he came in through a back door that didn't get closed. So I was like, wait, what's going on here?
Always sneaky. Well, Alex, as we close this out, I would love to know, I believe as people, there are things we hold really close to our hearts and are who we are. And so for anybody listening or watching today, if they were to walk away with one thing, what would your one thing be for them?
My one thing would be that, thinking about this conversation, that the externals of us are not what define us as people. Our job titles are not what define us as people. Like, yes, I'm the curriculum coordinator for 21st Century Teaching and Learning. That's what I do for a job. Who I am as a person is much more than that part of my job, which is why not being able to go into classrooms or work with students every day, yes, that has changed what I do for my job, but it hasn't changed who I am as a person. Being someone who is hard of hearing impacts my life and the way I have to navigate and communicate with others, but that doesn't define me as a person. It's a part of who I am, and it's a part that needs to be recognized and honored, because it's a part of my identity as much as my glasses and my curly hair. But those parts of our identity are not what define us as individuals and as people. They're just a part of the whole.
I love that. And that's the perfect way to end. Well, Alex, thank you so much for taking time out of your day today to spend it with me on Tell Your Story.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
And thank you, everybody, for listening or watching another episode of Tell Your Story. Remember, you can check out past episodes on iTunes, Spotify, SoundCloud, YouTube, wherever you get your stuff, it's there. I hope today's conversation with Alex has encouraged you to get out there and tell your story, because every story matters.